Week 12 of the fantasy football season. Here's quarterback starts at every matchup this week. Buffalo Bills at the Houston Texans Thursday Night Football. Josh Allen coming off a monster game. Last week, 6 touchdowns. He had over 45 fantasy points. And this week, even at a good Texan defense, a must start. CJ Stroud, we don't know if he's going to play in this game. He's had a bad concussion. He's missed the last couple weeks. And believe it or not, this offense has operated better under Davis Mills, in my opinion, than with CJ Stroud. So this week, doesn't matter who the starting quarterback is. I just don't like him in this matchup. They're both sits, even though I don't think the Bills' defense is all that good. Indianapolis Colts at the Kansas City Chiefs. Daniel Jones, a fringe option. This is a tough matchup versus one of the better defenses in the league in the Kansas City Chiefs. And last week we saw Bo Nix couldn't do much versus defense. In the last couple of weeks, Daniel Jones as well, his numbers have gone down, where the league's starting to figure him out a little bit, even though he's changed his game up in the system over there in Indianapolis. So this week in a tough matchup at Kansas City, he's a fringe option. Patrick Mahomes, last week it wasn't a good game for him. He didn't do much, but that was versus one of the better defenses in the league. So this week, back home, Arrowhead, I think Mahomes bounces back, has a good ball game. He's a start. Seattle Seahawks at the Titans. Sam Darnold, the fringe option. Sam Darnold, the last couple weeks, the turnovers have gone way up. Even in ball games where they were blowing teams out, he was turning the football over, especially going back a few weeks ago to a Monday Night Football game versus the Houston Texans, where Sam Darnold turned the football over a few times, even though they won. So this week at Tennessee, to me, Darnold's ceiling isn't that high, where this defense has actually been okay of late. He's a fringe option. Cam Waters said it's been a tough rookie season, and pretty much there's no real number one option in this passing game. Calvin Ridley now out for the season with the leg injury. Chigga Wango hasn't done much, and the rookie receivers, Elwick Maynor and Shamir DK haven't done much. He's a sit this week. Minnesota Vikings at the Green Bay Packers. J.J. McCarthy's been a turnover machine so far in the short handful of games we've seen him throughout his NFL career, and he's just forcing the issue and trying to force feed Justin Jefferson at times, which obviously isn't a good thing, where teams know that's where he's going to go with the football. So this week, versus one of the better defenses in the league of the Green Bay Packers, he's a sit. Jordan Love, a fringe option. I just don't think the ceiling is high for Jordan Love. And even let's say if Josh Jacobs is out of this game, I still think they're going to run the football a lot and run it effectively in this one. So Minnesota, their defense, the middle of the pack defense, with Robert Flores as a defensive coordinator for this Minnesota Viking team. But like I said, Jordan Love, besides 2 big games this season, we really haven't seen much from him. So this week, he's a fringe option, also with the receiving core banged up. New York Jets at the Baltimore Ravens. Tyrod Taylor, he's going to get the nod now for this New York Jet team, where a lot of fans were calling for Tyrod Taylor the last few weeks with Justin Fields. It was a bad season for him once again, and that's why he's been a journeyman bouncing around the last few seasons. But Tyrod Taylor, journeyman as well. And this week in a tough matchup with an improved Baltimore defense, he's an easy sit. Lamar Jackson, he's a lock each and every week. Last week he got his one bad game out of the way, is Lamar Jackson. And this week it's a great matchup with New York coming in, where we know they traded Quentin Williams, Sauce Gardner, Michael Carter away at the NFL trade deadline. So usually when Lamar has a bad game, he comes back and has a big one the week after, and I expect that this week. New York Giants at the Detroit Lions. Jackson Dart, we'll see if he comes off concussion protocol in this ball game. And this is a tougher matchup versus a good defense. But we've seen Dart all season long, no matter the matchup. Philadelphia early in the season on a Thursday night went out there, put up a good game. They won. We saw him going to Green Bay. He had a decent ball game in Week 8. And then we even saw him in Denver early in the season have a good game. So Jackson Dart, it doesn't matter the matchup, with his rushing upside and ability, obviously. He goes out there and he finds ways to put up fantasy points. So if he's back in the lineup this week, he's a start, even though he might be a little bit hesitant to run reckless like he has all season long. And obviously that's how he got the concussion. Jameis Winston to sit. Last week, it was a mixed bag ball game for Jameis Winston. But Winston, we know he's the ultimate gunslinger. There's going to be times he looks great and times he's a turnover machine. And this week, versus the top 10 defense, if he's back in the starting lineup, he's a sit. Jared Goff a start. Last week, it was a bad game overall, obviously, for this Detroit Lion team. And Goff, he couldn't get the football time on Ron St. Brown. But this week, it's a day and night difference going from versus Philadelphia in Philly to back home, where this offense, in terms of putting up fantasy points, is way better than they are on the road. So this week in a great matchup versus the Giants. Goff is back in the starting lineup. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Chicago Bears. Aaron Rodgers, he's got a chip in his left wrist, obviously non-throwing arm of Aaron Rodgers, but still he had to leave that ball game last week versus Cincinnati. And Aaron Rodgers, even this week, if he's back in the lineup, not 100%, this pass rush of Chicago, they get to the quarterback early and often. They create chaos, create turnovers. And this week, I just don't like the spot if he's back. He's a sitter. Mason Rudolph, obviously, he's been a career backup quarterback, even though he's had a lot of starts under his belt with injuries between Pittsburgh and Tennessee in his career. But this week, he's a sit. Caleb Williams, a fringe option. Last couple weeks, numbers have dropped off for Caleb Williams. And this run game's been very effective over there in Chicago with DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai, two solid running backs over there for this Bear team. So this week in a matchup versus a good defense coming into Soldier Field where the wins could be a factor as well. Williams, to me, is a fringe option. New England Patriots at the Cincinnati Bengals. Drake May, already one of the best quarterbacks in the league in his second season in the NFL. New England's won 8 in a row. He's a quarterback with a high IQ, spreading the football out. And this week in an easy matchup at a bad defense of Cincinnati, he's an easy start. Joe Flacco will start most likely the last week. Flacco's going to be in there quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengal team, where it looks like next week Joe Burrow in Week 13 is going to return. And we'll see if Jamar Chase appeals the suspension or goes through with it in this week's ball game. But either way, Joe Flacco, even in a mediocre matchup versus New England, he's a start. Cleveland Browns, Vegas Raiders, Shedeur Sanders going to get his first career start in the NFL. And obviously, he fell down the draft into the 5th round where he was supposed to be a first rounder or even a top 3 pick in the past NFL draft. So this week, it's a good matchup for him to break in at the Vegas Raiders. We just saw the Dallas Cowboys go out there, put up a big game, 33 points in that one. Dak Prescott 4 touchdowns. But Shedeur Sanders, he didn't look good in that ball game. I know he's coming in versus a good Raven defense in the 4th quarter in that game last week, but he looked like a guy who wasn't ready for the moment. And we'll see this week with the prep and obviously an easier matchup if he could go out there and make plays. But this week in the matchup with the Vegas Raiders, even though they're a bad defense, I would take a wait-and-see approach with Shedeur. I would pick him up on the waiver wire in deeper 2-quarterback leagues, but nothing more than that. So he's a sit in. Geno Smith to sit. He's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. I think this Raider team in the offseason going into the NFL draft will have a top 10 pick. At worst case is this Vegas Raider team. They're going to draft the quarterback. Geno's been an interception machine, holding on to the football too long, taking big hits. And this week versus a vicious Brown defense, obviously led by Myles Garrett, the best pass rusher in pro football. He's a sit this week. The Jaguars at the Arizona Cardinals. Trevor Lawrence, a fringe option. It hasn't been a great fantasy season once again for Trevor Lawrence. I know they've dealt with injuries all season long. Brian Thomas in and out of the lineup. Brenton Strange, he's missed the majority of the season. Travis Hunter as well, he's out for the season. So I know a lot of injuries. I know this week a pretty good matchup on paper at the Arizona Cardinals, but to me it's just tough to trust Lawrence week in and week out. So at best, he's a fringe option. Jacoby Brissett to start. It doesn't matter garbage time or if they're in a game, he's going out there, and then every start he's had this season, 20 or more fantasy points. He's been the ultimate streaming option and pickup option over the last few weeks is Brissett, where last week they got blown out versus San Francisco, but he went for 450 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So it was a big game last week for Brissett. So this week could be a ball game versus Jacksonville where it's tight or not, but this run game's pretty much been non-existent as well. So he's a start. Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. Jalen Hurts to start. I know the last couple weeks the numbers haven't been great for Jalen Hurts, but this week they know they're versus one of the better offenses in the league, even though over the last 2 weeks they've shut down 2 good offenses in the Green Bay Packers on Monday night in Week 10, and then Week 11 shutting down Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions offense to only 9 points. So this defense is playing great, but this Eagle offense really hasn't done much either the last 2 weeks. But to win 2 games in a row with 10 points and then 16 points in back-to-back games, that's how impressive the defense has been. But this week at Dallas, not a great defense, obviously. I know they definitely beefed up that defense a little bit at the trade deadline. Quinn Williams traded for Logan Wilson and Malik Hooker and Overshown back in the lineup off injury. But still, I think Jalen Hurts goes out there, has a good track record versus Dallas. He's a start, and Dak Prescott is start. Dak Prescott, it's been a solid season for him. He's had a couple bad games versus Chicago early in the season, and then a bad one a few weeks ago Monday night versus the Arizona Cardinals. But last week he went out there, I know he's the Raiders, threw for 4 touchdowns in that ball game. And when you got wide receivers like CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and a good tight end in Jake Ferguson, it makes everything easier, and one of the better offensive lines in the league. And this week, very tough matchup versus one of the better defenses in the league. I still would give Dak the start because, like I said, the numbers more weeks than not, have been there, and he's putting up some big numbers this season. So he's a start for me this week, even in the tough matchup. Atlanta Falcons at the New Orleans Saints. Kirk Cousins, he's going to start now with Michael Penix possibly out for the season with a knee injury. He went on IR, and that's why you need a good backup, even though this season's over for this Atlanta Falcons team. 3-7 on their way to another solid pick in the NFL draft. So this week, I know it's a good matchup in New Orleans. I know Kirk Cousins had some success early in the season last year with this Atlanta Falcon team. Even in this matchup, which is great on paper, he's a sit-in. Tyler Show, it was a nice victory for this New Orleans Saints team to go out there a few weeks ago and win at the Carolina Panthers. But Show still needs to do a lot more, in my opinion. I know this Falcon defense has been hit or miss all the season, but like I said, you got to see more out of Show to have him in your starting lineups. He's a sit. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Rams. I believe this is going to be a high-scoring game. I know last couple weeks, Baker Mayfield, his numbers have been up and down. Last week, he did find the end zone on a crazy run where he bounced off his head, got up, threw the football into the crowd, and it was a high-scoring ball game where they lost 44-32. But Baker, he's a gamer versus one of his former teams, and on the fast track on Sunday night, like I said, this is going to be high-scoring in my opinion. He's a start. Matthew Stafford to start. Last week, one of the worst games of the year was for Matthew Stafford, but he still threw for 2 touchdowns, still had 18 fantasy points. So this week, versus the Bucs, who can't stop anyone, Josh Allen just had 6 touchdowns versus him. He's a start. In the final game of the week, Monday night, Carolina Panthers at the San Francisco 49ers. We'll see if Bryce Young gives it a go. Right now, he's banged up with an ankle injury, but even if he does give it a go, he's a sit for me as Bryce Young. I know last week he went out there, had the monster game, led his team from behind and won the ball game at the Atlanta Falcons. But like I said, he's been banged up on and off all season, and right now it's not looking like 100% he's going to play. And Andy Dalton, if he does step in as the starter, I have no confidence in him for the veteran. He's more of a game manager and a backup, so he will be a sit. And to Brock Purdy, he's a start. Last week he went out there, I know it was the Arizona Cardinals, indoors as well, which is always a plus for any player not to deal with outside elements, and he had a big game as Brock Purdy, but he did look like he was in mid-season form. Him and George Kittle were connecting. Him and Juwan Jennings were making plays. So this week, versus a mediocre Carolina defense, he's a start. So that's quarterback start, sit every matchup for Week 12 of the fantasy football season.